Well, again, I am Bill Kerns with Contractor Supply. I recognize several faces out here. It's kind of a pleasure to see everybody. This is the second time I've got to do something similar to this. I appreciate Kathy and the Master Gardeners inviting us out to do this, I think. But this is going to be relatively an informal presentation. We're not going to have any PowerPoints. This is going to be something that it's going to do whatever you guys want done. Okay, I'm prepared to talk about turf. I'm prepared to talk about drip. I'm prepared to talk about the maintenance of the system, how to work a system. I'm prepared to talk about controllers. I'm going to keep it as generic to irrigation as we possibly can. This isn't a rah-rah Rainbird. This isn't a rah-rah CSI. This is about getting water from a source out to your plants and turf. Okay? Everybody has certain situations. We can try and hit on them as we go through, or we can try and pick it up at the end. So you guys, if somebody has a similar situation, maybe we can solve a challenge. The biggest thing that I would like to accomplish out of this is understanding what a controlled irrigation system's about. Now, has anybody got any particular, do you guys want to talk about more about drip or more about turf, or should we just cruise through it all and try and figure it all out?
Cover it all.
Okay. Well, we're going to try and do it. In the practice round, it took about an hour, so if you guys got that, we're going to give it to you, and then we'll give you, and if we hit a point, we'll hit it, and you guys will get it done. So when I say a controlled irrigation system, that has a lot of different features to it. Let's face it, if we have water, it goes through a piece of pipe, it splashes on a pipe or on the ground, turf, or tree, it's irrigated, right? We want to talk about a controlled irrigation system. A controlled irrigation system has about 3 things that's involved. It has heads, piping, and controllers. I'm going to try and show you how, even though you have to invest in a controlled irrigation system, how it can save you time, can save you money, and it can save you water. Okay, it really can. How many people are on what I'm going to call metered watered systems? You're having to pay for your water. Okay, now with the regional water, it's more. First time, 2 times I did this up at the college, nobody was. The only people that were watering or gardening were out in the county, so this is good. We all know that the regional water and the city water has gotten fairly expensive. Still low by standards around us, but in our world it's pretty expensive. I think it's something that we can really hit on. There's certain things we need to know to build a system. If somebody comes to my store and say, Bill, can you design me a system? I said, you bet. What do I need to know? I need to know your flow, what your GPM is available. I need to know how much pressure you have. I need to know if you have a lot of slope in your yard. Okay? We need to know, or you need to know, what kind of soils you have. We have everything from the toughest clay in the world. We have sand. Some people have been very fortunate to be able to haul in good topsoil, have something to work with. Some of you people have been working with your lawns for a long time and have it very well maintained. We need to know north, east, west, and south. We need to know your sunny sides, your shady sides, that kind of thing. That's all very important. We also need to know anything that can block water if we're going to put it down on your turf. So if you guys got sheds and propane tanks and steps and decks and concrete, our whole idea is not to water those. They don't grow any bigger, and we're trying to conserve. And that's why when we decide what we're going to do, I always say there's a job for every head and a head for every job. It's no different than a shovel. Nobody can go to work in a yard with one shovel. Nobody can sprinkle their lawn with one system. If any of you guys have an installer, which I think right now there's some pretty quality installers around, but it's been known to happen. I just use the old 5004. It does everything. I have the maxi pause. I can take them from 10 feet to 30 feet. If you have an installer trying to do that, or if your yard if you happen to inherit a yard that is plumbed that way, it needs work. Don't hire the fellow that says he can do it with every head, because it's impossible. And if you guys got your little brochures, you can kind of follow along. The most popular spray head in the whole world, even though there's many manufacturers, the 1800 series pop-up spray is the best spray head, bar none. It is the standard of the industry. It's been around the longest. It does the best job. This head shoots a spray nozzle. What's the difference between a spray nozzle and a rotor nozzle? If you think about it, if you look at your patterns of a spray nozzle, they're good from 4 feet to 15 feet, okay? That head, it would be tough. You'd put a lot of heads in if you're watering a 75 by 100 foot area. You can do it. There's some lawns in town that we've done it. But you're going to put a lot of heads in. These heads, when they water, when that head pops up, and I'm doing a half circle, so I can't draw a circle, it's watering everything in that pattern the whole time it's watering. So I don't care if it's going out 4 feet, it's going out 15 feet. For the whole time it's watering its whole pattern. Any of the rotors, the old oscillating head, the old maxi paw, everybody's had them. Everybody has the spike. I mean, that's been the head that's been around. The new rotor heads, when they pop up, when they hit.
Bill, can we have you use a different marker? Can you see those? Can you guys see those?
So when they hit, this pattern is moving. So when it's watering here, it's not watering there. It's opposite of a rotor. And if you look at any of your charts, and that includes these rotary nozzles, the precipitation rate out of a spray head is about 1.5 inches an hour. Because it's watering its whole pattern, it's a short distance. Any of the rotor heads are about 0.5 inch an hour. So when we sit there and you say, can you design me a sprinkler system? I'm going to look at a layout and I'm going to try and optimize my distance and my precipitation rate. I can't tell you how important it is to know your precipitation rate. You guys are in the master gardeners. Your whole idea is you want to put the minimum amount of water on and maximize the result, correct? So what we're going to make is what we call heavy water. Not hard water, we already got that. We're making heavy water. So when we talk about, remember I mentioned we need to know your pressure. More's not better. That, I live over by foothills. When I first put my sprinkler system in, I didn't know. We just put them in. So when my last zone would shut off, my downstairs toilet would flush. And water hammering, boom. When my pipes, when that zone kicked on, I see a gentleman nodding. It would sit there and my pipes would just knock. And and my water softener would whistle, and my ice maker would rattle, and so as I became more knowledgeable in the industry, knock your pressure down. You won't affect the flow. Pressure always equalizes. Flows can be adjusted. So once you get your pressures to operate, now if you don't want to do it at the house, if you don't want to go and put a PRV in your house, and I'm going to tell you, if anybody's operating over 80 PSI, and Diane can back me up on this, being from the old water department, if you're operating over 80 PSI in the plumbing on your home, you should put a PRV in. A lot of your problems, a lot of your noise is going to go away.
What's PRV?
Pressure reducing valve. Excuse me. Acronyms are terrible. We talk about PVC, PRBs, and ABS, and we're terrible about this. But when you put a pressure reducing valve in, all your problems go away. What we want, and if you look at your books, we want 30 pounds for a spray nozzle. Any of the spray nozzles, they're on these little pop-ups, 4 foot to 15 foot, optimum pressure is 30 psi. If you look at that, they offer a head because you don't want to knock your whole house down to 30 psi. Gosh. Now, country living, they set their pressure switches at 2040 and they operate at 30 psi and they love it. That's all they know. We don't in town. Most of us have, most of you people that even in the country, you're operating on 40, 60 pressure switches. Some are even higher than that. Some of you are on regional water, so you got much better pressure. A droplet, we want heavy water. Remember, we don't want the wind to take this water away. The rule of thumb is for every 10 pounds of pressure you're operating over optimum is also the percentage of water that's being misted and blown away. Okay, so if you're operating, if your house, you got your PRV and you're out, your operating pressures at a beautiful, I'm fortunate, mine's right between 50 and 45, right where I need to be my rotors. But if I'm operating at 50 pounds with my spray heads, that's 20% of my misting, my sprays that are being wasted. So I put in PRS heads right at that zone. So those heads become heavy water. And with the spray nozzles, and all the nozzles that go into anybody's heads, and I don't care, Toro, Hunter, Rainbird, and you're going to hear me talk about the major manufacturers. There's a lot of others, and most of them are not what I'm going to call turf quality. You see them a lot at the home stores and whatnot, and that's fine. They still get water out, they still can irrigate with. They're usually knockoffs and copies of. So we're going to talk about the big hitters, but most of their heavy waters, everybody's sprays want 30 pounds. So if you have a guy that says, well, the 1804, the most common head, is a $2 head. That's the one I want. And the 1803 RS is a $3.25 head. That's the one I'm going to buy. And then if you have slopes, then we're going to talk about, and they mention in here, heads with Seal-O-Matic, and they have them both in the rotors and in the sprays. Who wants to buy water twice? Anybody interested in buying water twice? It used to be really a hot topic to put self-draining sprinkler systems in. The little king drains, so when your zone shut off, it would drain out. I don't have to worry about winterizing. I can go till later. Okay, that's great. It'd be nice if you could turn that on late September and October, because when did we have our first snow last year? It was like September 15th, or it came early, right? And then we have that Indian summer, and I still want to water, but I don't have to worry about it. All summer long, if you have one of those systems and you have slopes and you notice those bottom heads are kind of bubbling out and you always got to marsh around a couple of your low heads, you're buying that zone every time. So if you think about it, 1-inch pipe, you know, a lot of times an average zone's between 60 and 100 feet. You're talking approximately 2.5 gallons that you're rebuying every time. The guy says, what's 2.5 gallons? I'd rather have self-draining. That's up to you, but it's going to add up over time and over years. And it creates a heck of a mess that'll end of the slope. The whole, again, remember, we want efficiency, we want to save you money. Every head, every major manufacturer, and I will tell you that Rainbird has optimized it, every time you see these little white rings and all these seals around their heads, those are wiper seals. What makes those efficient and where they help you save a little money is they self-flush the head. They wipe everything clean. So new seed, mulch, if you have your heads placed maybe in a mulch area that pop up and spray greenery, if you got a head that doesn't have a good wiper seal, they get hung up. How many times you've walked around a yard and seen heads sticking up and you got to tap on them? And that tells you that a wiper seal might be bad or it's full of debris. If that's the case, the head's probably not popping up all the way either, and it's not sealing off. these were notorious. They'd be full of water, they'd be full of debris, they'd bubble around. And so even at the rotors, if they can't come up and set, if they're just part way and they're sitting there doing this, they're leaking water. So you're spending more water right around a head than you are spraying. A good quality head with the wiper shield keeping itself clean saves you money. Did it cost more up front? Saves you money down the road. It's the old saying, you get what you pay for. When you're talking about precipitation rate, which we talked about sprays and if you look at most charts, 1.5 inches of water per hour. In any way, even if it's a 4-footer, in that 4 foot, if you run it for an hour, it's going to drop 1.5 inches of water. If it's 15-foot radius, it's going to put it down about 1.5 inches of water in an hour. 1/2 inch in the rotors. So when I have a design, and I quick kind of picked one that I just recently did, typical driveway, house, what I call the posy patch. It has all the annuals, perennials, and everything bunched up. Then around the side of the house, they had some greenery and shrubbery spaced out. They went from 15 feet about up to 24 foot on a taper, kind of a wavy concrete border. And then they had a narrow strip that was 12 by 36. The guy that walked, how the original design was years ago, the guy took this maxi-paw, he took the old diffuser screw and he just cranked her down. That head was designed to operate at 25 feet, 22 to 25 feet, 28 stretching it. Anything below, you've lost all the engineering. He just cranked the screw down real tight here, opened it up, did a really nice job over here, flooded this, didn't get any coverage. If you're going to come to me or anybody else, any quality installer, they're going to start with rotary nozzles. Everybody's heard the new, they kind of look like your hand. I don't care what distance they have, a short, little, longer, short, and they go like this. And you've seen them if you've been down Highway 59 Boulevard. This is a great way to cheat. Back in the old days, before these, if you didn't want to screw your maxi-paw, they'd put 2 of these spray heads in here. They shot 15 foot. And then they'd go in, then they'd start going to the rotors. What would happen? You're watering your zone for 15 minutes, right? 20 minutes maybe? That's putting down 1.5 inches precipitation rate. These are putting down half precipitation rate. Guess what part of the yard was greener? So, this is brown, I need it run to longer. This is getting greener. This is finally catching up, but this is really green. So now, we take these rotary nozzles, they still mount on the same good head, and we can pick our distance, 8 to 14 feet, 13 to 18 feet, 17 to 24 feet. So now, if you have parts in your yard where you've seen where they broke the rules, where they had that narrow area and they said, well, I had to throw a spray head in here because the other one shot too far. Now you can replace them with these rotary nozzles. And now you have a nozzle that's putting out 1/2 inch an hour because it's moving. It's watering just like a head going like this. It's going like this, but it's not watering 100% of the pattern. So now I got equal precipitation rate across my impacts. And I could use rotary nozzles on the narrow. I could use the good old-fashioned, the 3500. It's a great little head. This is what we call our 17 to 25 footer. 3500 means if I had enough water, I wanted to put the biggest nozzle, this thing could shoot 35 feet. I wouldn't recommend it at all for that. We recommend this head to 25-ish to that 17. Now that we have these, we're using this even less, more to the 20, to that 26, 25 foot. This is that in-between head. It's a great head, it's very affordable. Again, 1/2 inch precipitation. When you buy heads through a turf distributor, you'll get all your nozzles. With a box store, they give you one it comes with. Usually it's a number 3 gallons a minute. Well, that's shooting a set distance. The nozzle sets a distance. On any of the rotary nozzles or rotor heads of any manufacturer, you get a tree of nozzles. The number indicates at 45 psi, because that's the optimum operating pressure for any rotor of any manufacturer. The number will usually indicate the GPM used also. The old impacts always came with the the blue nozzle. It was throwing out 3 gallons a minute no matter what. Covering that 20 to 25 foot, but it's putting out 3 gallons a minute. Now you can cover 20 feet with 1 gallon a minute, a very nice rain arc. You just adjust your time. You can still get that same green yard using 1 or 1.5 gallons a minute versus 3. Most of the time, an impact head is durable and long lasting. I still have 3 of my original 12 that I put in 1990. They've never wore out. But as reliable as they are, they used a lot of water. Okay? They cheated the system. They were the best head for watering around itself and out because of that diffuser. Because just like the sprinkler, the old impacts you put down on the spike and put in, it's a great little head, but you're dumping about 3 gallons a minute out. So if you don't have a controlled irrigation system where you're using a controller and not balancing your time for zones, you're wasting water. It's green. That's what you want, but could you do it less time and with less water and and save you money? Now, a whole nother topic and for a whole nother speaker, once you know your soils, you know what type of grasses you have, once you have your irrigation in place, talk to your fertilizing people. What do we need to break up your soils? A lot of gypsum gets used in this town with the clays. A lot of different fertilizers for a lot of different plants. Proper watering with the proper chemical, you know, they used to say life by chemical was good when we were young, but we don't talk about that anymore. But if you sit there and get with your people, and I'm sure through the Master Gardeners you have resources to talk about fertilizers, do that. Because proper watering, proper placement, once you get all this in place, using the proper chemical on your lawn will even enhance using less water. When we talk about placements of heads, it's so critical. When the guy's running the rain train, that's great. When the guy has the spikes and they have them all daisy chained together and he can cover his whole lawn, that's great. At least they're trying to irrigate and they're just not giving up on it. The challenge that I've always seen, if I have a nice strip of lawn and I got the old tractor and it's watering a circle, and it's watering a circle, and it's watering a circle, and it's watering a circle. Well, then the guy says, well, I got brown spots. So now I'm going to go turn the arms up a little farther. So now I'm going to water a bigger circle. By God, I took care of those brown spots. And the kids are floating a boat down the curb. And mother's sitting there trying to clean the rust or the iron or something off her patio in their house. Get that down. So now he's back to brown spots. Same thing what happens. And it's not wrong. It's just not efficient. The guy that has the daisy chain. And this is what I normally see is, let's just say the guy had 90 feet. Well, that can shoot, I'm going to do this wrong, I know I am, So this thing can come out here and they'll shoot circle to circle. That one can water this one can water this one, and that one can water that one, okay? And I'll get it all even this way, but what happens is, that is what they call arc to arc coverage. So what happens is, out here at the end of the arcs, it's brown. It's really green in here and right here. Because by definition, any head that shoots out, and we can see it at any sprinkler, they water really good from me to the end of the table. Then there's that kind of void from the table kind of to you guys, and then it's good out there at the end of the arc. The guy, I got a green yard, he puts out these things at 3 to 4, those usually have 3 to 4 gallons a minute. Well, I wanted to get it good and green, so I put it on there for 2 hours. 3 heads, 90 feet by 30 feet. Okay? Proper placement of a head. If I have 90 feet, I got a head here. I got one at 30. I got one at 60. And I got one at 90. And I got one at 30. And I got one at 60. I got one at 30, 60, and 90. Now, I don't have arc-to-arc coverage. I got head-to-head coverage. Because why do I need head-to-head? This head doesn't water very good right out here, or this one. So this head waters to here, all the way to here. This happy head, he's going to water like that. This happy head, he's going to water like that. And this happy head is going to water like that. And so forth. This one's going to come down here. This one's going to come to here. This one's going to come up to here. And this one's going to go to here. There's not anywhere in here that you have single coverage. Everything has double, most has triple. Now, I can water, which I know that I do, on a 30 by 90 area. I'm probably watering this whole thing, depending on my soils, depending on my shade, depending on all the parameters, but I'm probably running this 2 zones. Let's say I got sun, fairly tight soils. I have this all watered in somewhere between 30 to 40 minutes. And I did this with a match precipitation nozzle at a set gallon per minute, where he dumped, let's just say 3 gallons an hour out of each one of them, and he ran it for 2 hours, so we got, what, that's 6, 12, and 18, right? Where are we at? So they used 18 gallons a minute the whole time they were running those? If this was running for 2 hours at 3 gallons, well, 3 gallons a minute for 60 minutes, for 120 minutes, where are we at? I'm losing it now. Doing my math wrong. So 3 gallons a minute times 3 is 9 gallons a minute. So times 60. See, at 9 gallons a minute, if you ran all 3 of them for 60 minutes, it's 540 gallons, right? If I'm doing this with, I know that I'm doing with about a 2 gallon a minute, 2 GPMs per head, and I'm running it for 30 minutes, and I've got the whole thing covered. It's amazing how much, and I don't have any brown spots at the end of my arc. I'm not watering the gutter, and I'm not watering the house. Head placement, precipitation is huge as far as cost savings, because at the end of the day, what are we trying to save? Money, along with having the greenest yard we can. And does everybody want a golf course green yard? I don't necessarily need a golf course. I like what I call tolerable green. I like my lawn to fit within my budget and still have a nice tolerable lawn. If we get days of wind, you know, that's to me is huge. I'm not the guy. Do I do the volunteer watering program? Absolutely. Just some days I volunteer to use my neighbor's yard across the street on his days watering because he's not watering. And other days I use my water and the guy next to me because he's not watering. I might water twice. I like to water when there's not wind. To me, wind is our worst enemy out here. If we get rain, we say, praise Jesus, I'm going to water anyway because it needs it, you know, most of the time. If you guys have a lot of trees, you'll find a lot of our trees, the grass underneath the trees don't get watered. You may have to water anyway. Now, we've been blessed this spring. A lot of people haven't even turned their systems on yet, right? So, but now it's getting time. We see it's drying out. We want to maintain it. So if you haven't fired yours up, maybe when we get to the end of this, we can walk through and look for stuff for you to look for to see to head off problems and whatnot. When we talked about controlled watering system, the biggest thing we talked about was the controlled time. When we talk about backing this guy just doing this, turning it on, what's the thing that every one of these guys had to do? The guy with the rain train, the guy with the impacts. They had to be there to turn them on, and they had to get here sometime home to shut it off. I don't know how many times I got two neighbors that I've walked over and shut their hose spigot off because they went grocery shopping and the rain train jumped the track. And it was dug into the lawn and shooting up in the air and, you know, you just go over and shut it off. Sometimes I've reset it for them, or they got hung up with kids, forgot, okay? Controlled watering systems, and I applaud anybody, even if they're using the battery timer. You know, on a drip irrigation, they went down and got the most inexpensive 9-volt. At least you're controlling it. You're turning it on at a set time and it's shutting off at a set time. A controlled watering system with the proper heads in place, you know the GPM. You can look it up right on the chart when you buy the units. You know that I'm shooting 20 feet, I'm using 1 gallon a minute, I got my 20-foot coverage. I can put this on the same zone because I'm still at half-inch precipitation. I can put it with this head that's covering 37 feet. Using a number 2 or number 2.5 nozzle. Again, the precipitation rate for that 37 feet is still a ½ inch per hour. So I can put these heads with the rotary nozzle, I can put these all on the same zone, keep my precipitation rate the same, even though I'm shooting more because it's going a farther distance, so it has more to water, but the precipitation rate over that same distance is the same as one shooting 16 feet on a rotary nozzle as it is shooting 37 feet on a big head. Okay, the precipitation rate is what we're looking for. I go to my Master Gardener book and I say, this grass would like to have a ½ inch of water at this temperature every 4 days. I can sit and I know how much my precipitation rate is. I can monitor my grass. I can keep that tolerable green grass at an affordable rate because I'm just not leaving my clock on and watering every other day because they say that's your volunteer water program. Now, if you want to do that, that's fine. Control your times. So if you know that you're going to water every other day and your lawn needs it, back your times down. If you want to double check, go down and save your tuna cans. That used to be the old Petri dish test, you know. You throw your Frisbees, anything that was the same to catch water out through a zone. When it runs, see if the water's the same in all the cans. And if it's not, let's adjust it. What do we have? What do we got? Too big of a nozzle? Not a big enough nozzle. Do we have a screw screwed down? Is the head buried halfway? It's not popping up and clearing the grass. Why aren't we getting even coverage? Let's monitor it. So once we have the times and you get your precipitation rate, you can back it down to the optimum watering time that you need to maximize the green that you want. If anybody comes in and sets your clock up, and I'm putting every zone at 20 minutes, probably not the right fella to program your clock. Some zones will be the same time. Remember we talked about northeast, west, and south, shade, not shade? Now I have a couple zones that I do run at the same time. Only 2 out of 6. And I got a little yard. I only got 3,500 square foot to 4,000 I'm watering. I got my neighbor has a big tray over here. I got one part of my yard's in the direct sun. I have one zone that's all misters, spray heads. There's no way I'm running a spray zone at the same distance or the same length of time as a rotor zone. So if you have your clock set up all on the same zones, that means you have everything out in the same sun and the same soil. Maybe it's a matter of 3 and 4 minutes that is all change. But if you think about it, if you got 4 heads on a zone running 2 gallons a minute, so that zone's running 8 gallons a minute, and you're running it for 20 minutes, there's 160 gallons. But if I could knock that zone down to 17, and I can take off that many more gallons every time you water, and you can adjust your zones accordingly, look at the cost savings, look at the water savings. It doesn't hurt to have opposite times. Is it simple to program them all the same? Sure. Absolutely, it's simple. But do yourself a favor. Save that X amount of gallons every time you can. You know, that's imperative. When you talk about concrete and pavers, a lot of people have a lot of hardscapes, a lot of rocks. You notice it gets brown along those edges. It's okay, especially when we start getting this real hot. Let that whip a little bit. It's okay to water some of the concrete. Kind of keep it cool. Concrete, even cured old concrete, hotter than heck and harder than heck, will absorb that moisture and it'll keep that edge grass from burning up. You know, we don't want to have enough water like the rain train so we're floating a boat down the gutter, but if we're watering and it's just kind of there and that edge of that concrete's wet and we keep that edge of that concrete on a driveway or this like that, that's fine. That's probably recommended. When you place your heads, speaking of concrete and driveways, if we're doing head-to-head coverage like we're supposed to, this head's going to water in behind that head. This head's going to water in behind that head. This head's going to water in behind that head. You don't have to put your heads real tight in the corners, especially when you're driving around the corner and your teenage kids are always cutting it. Trust me, I know. When you're working on your edging on your sidewalks and things like this, if your head's right there on the side, you have a tendency to maybe hit it with the weed eater, hit it with whatever. Your head can be set in a little bit. Do your due diligence. Don't push the limits to where you got 15-foot spray nozzles and put them on 15-foot centers. Put them on 14.5-foot centers or 14. Check to see what your lawn and your flows are really putting out. When you got to remember, when you look at any chart, that's in a controlled room in a controlled lab with no Wyoming wind. So we see exactly where they hit. Crunch it up a little bit. When I design them, and I've told every one of my customers ever come in, scoot them in. Don't push the limits. So I can water by it. And this head will shoot over and it'll water just the edge of that concrete in that driveway. It's okay. Neat thing about anybody's good controller out there, and some of the things you might not realize you have, a lot of them are, and you can look in chart, a lot of them are getting Wi-Fi ready, and I use the heck out of mine. Every time I go out to adjust a head, because it's not a matter if you got to adjust them, it's when. Gears slip, things move, things settle, it just happens. When I go out to adjust a head, I don't have to go back, because I did this one day. You don't go down the stairs, shut your clock off, go take your adjustment, run back in, oh, it didn't work, run back in the house, take your shoes off, go in there, shut your clock off, run back out, put your shoes on, oh, that didn't work, run down. About the 5th time, I go help a lot of people. It takes me 15 minutes than anybody else. My house took me 2 hours. I had a piece of stick stuck in one of these, and I couldn't get it. I got so tired taking off my shoes, I ruined our carpet. So my wife said, you go buy a new clock. So now I could sit here with my phone, hit my zone, check it, looks great. Check the next, oh, I got some debris, I got some mulch, I need to clean it. Shut that off, work on it, make sure it's where, step back, turn it on. HVAC people, your heating and air conditioning people, everybody has gone to almost Wi-Fi ready. These clocks that are Wi-Fi ready, I was on vacation. I did set my clock to go off every other day, had my time set, because we were going to be gone for about 7 to 10 days. We're watching our weather. We all watch our weather on the phone now. We get a phone call from one of our kids, man, it's been pouring here. Great. Got on my phone, shut it off. No, I didn't have to call anybody up to go shut my irrigation system off. I saved a lot of money because it'd been pouring a couple days, didn't have to water I just shut her down until we needed to. The other thing that's on there, any good clock has what's seasonal adjustment. If you're tired of programming a clock, don't be tired. Almost every clock, have anybody seen the seasonal adjustment on their clocks? Have you ever noticed that? So you set your program, you go to seasonal adjustment, and if you like your program for everyday use, that's great. We've had a bunch of rain. Don't go reprogram your clock. Take your seasonal adjustment and turn it down. Most of them will take you down to 0. So if you have a clock and you got your 20-minute zone, your 10-minute zone, your 8-minute zone, whatever zones you have, you're going to go down to 80. So now that 10-minute zone is going to run for 8 minutes. Now you can take it down to 60%. We've had all sorts of rain, but maybe you think, you want to water some, you just take it down. Now we get in past July 4th and our more normal programming isn't keeping up. Now I just go up to above seasonal adjustment. I don't sit there and reprogram all my zones. I do the math. So that 10-minute zone, I go up to 120%. Now it's going to run it for 12 minutes. Now I can go up to, most clocks will take you up to over 100%. So you can take a 10-minute zone and increase it a whole other 10 minutes and run that for 20. And so forth all the way down. And that'll be all the zones. The other thing that almost every clock has is multiple start times and multiple programs. The advantage of multiple programs and start times is when you have turf and drip in the same yard. If somebody is running drip with their turf program, it's really tough to do that unless drip's always either the last or the first. A lot of people, you water your turf when? When do you guys mostly water your grass? 7 to 7, right? That's 7 in the evening to 7 in the morning. Recommended cool times. A lot of times you got to drip. Sometimes it's necessary to drip during the day in the heat of the day, especially for these seedlings, these 100 new trees. You don't want to be watering turf then.
Don't want to do it manually either.
Right. And I had a friend, we just put one in, they got 200 of your extension trees. I got to help plant those too. But it's a bad program you got. But when you want to drip, a lot of times once you do the math, you got your turf, use program B, C, or D. Put your drip on another program. A lot of people will have enough flow. If you, again, go back to stage 1, know your flows. Drips are doing what? Gallons per hour. Turf is doing gallons per minute. Think about it, gallons per hour versus minutes. So they're not using usually much more. A big drip system is 3 gallons a minute. That's huge. That's a really big drip system because you're getting to gallons per hour. There's several people that will combine, even though they can't start, they'll collate some start times and they'll get a turf. If your clock will do it, they'll do a turf and a drip zone at the same time. If your clocks won't do it, I recommend running most of your drips off a separate program so your turf can run through and you can adjust those start times as necessary. You don't have to affect your drip. You can keep your drip maintaining, or if your turf, you add more trees, you need to work on your drip, you're not affecting your turf program. You don't have to delay the start time if you want to run your drip longer and all of a sudden your drip's not done but your turf's supposed to start. I like to run those on opposite programs, and it keeps things cleaner. The other thing, I guess the biggest thing that a clock comes, and again it goes back to the simple battery operated one, you don't have to be there to shut it off. I mean, you're not wasting all that water, because I don't know how many times I did it myself, watering a new tree we had. I have one tree, put the hose on it, went to bed. It was well watered in the morning. So it is what it is. If you want to take a little break real quick, we can. If not, we're going to jump right into drip irrigation. So, or is there any questions on turf that you want to ask or talk about now? Yes, ma'am.
Years ago, the city of Gillette had a program where they brought in some people from Colorado to do audits of the splatter system. And he told me at the time that, we should water at 2 in the morning, right? And he said if I was going to water 15 minutes, then I should break it up into 3 sections of 5 minutes. So I do 5 minutes starting at 2 a.m. on each zone. Then at 3 a.m., again, 5 minutes each zone. And because he said it gave time for it to soak in. And then, so is that real? Is that? Again, a good clock will have this. That's what they call a cycle and soak program. Right.
Okay? Where we see cycle and, and again, know your soils, know your grass. Okay? There's nothing wrong with that philosophy. But it also can get awful complicated in programming. Where we see cycle and soak, where I use cycle and soak most, or that type of programming, is on slopes. And the real trick was, and I don't know where he came up with his number, because if he knew your soils and knew your grasses, and he was that good, then that's where he knows his numbers. If you got, where I see on cycle and soak is on slopes, and what we used to do is cycle and soak on slopes is we'd water it till we started seeing the water running off. Your ground will take X right away. If it can run for 5 minutes or 2 minutes or 3 minutes, how steep is the slope? So that zone and how cycle and soak, your clock will have it. Most good clocks will have it. Cycle and soak feature, that zone starts. We'll call it the slope zone. And it runs, and let's say we'll pick the 5-minute program. It'll run. It shuts down. The next zone takes off. And the cycle and soak, the cycle is how long do you let it delay? So if your next zone is a 15-minute zone, then you say I'm going to rest it for 15 minutes, and in 15 minutes that thing's going to give it another 5-minute shot. And then the next program, they won't run 2 valves at once, so the next program after that 15-minute zone, it'll kick right back on because it's still calling for that zone. It didn't run out of time. So the next zone will do its 10-minute or 15-minute thing. And you have that rest minute for 15 minutes. So when that 15 minutes comes up, that zone kicks back on, waters that slope again. Basically what you're doing, but instead of having to reprogram it, you can do it within the clock a lot of times. But that's that cycle and soak, which you're talking about. On flat surfaces, I haven't seen it much. Real tight clays, really super tight clays, I've seen people do that quite frequently. Most of you, if you have any kind of a mature lawn or an existing lawn, you've got it fertilized, you've broke it up, you've got it aerated. It's a little more, has a lot more porosity than going out here and finding a clay hill and trying to water it. So know your soils. So if your soils aren't, if it's taking the water and it's doing a nice even job of watering, I don't know if I'd worry about that program as much. Slopes, yeah, I really see it a lot on slopes and really tight soils. If any of you guys got brand new homes or out in the country where you basically set your home and you weren't able to bring a lot of fill in and you're working with what the good Lord gave us out here, the more you cycle and soak, the more it absorbs. The more it absorbs, the more it loosens up. And then that again, we talked about our life by chemical. There's fertilizers, there's gypsums, there's a lot of things out there will aid in making water wetter. You ever heard that phrase, make water wetter? Well, we're working on making water heavier, but you use your chemical to make water wetter. It's really where, when you got heavy water wetter, it's the best, that's the best combination. Any other? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I've got a nozzle that, or rotary, that goes up, probably shoots out, I'm guessing 20 feet, but it shoots out with a good strong stream, and it does a great job of watering 20 feet out. There's very little precipitation prior to that. Everything else after that 20 feet is brown. Is there something, do I need to change a nozzle on the rotary, or what do I do?
Well, first of all, I would like to know, it all depends on type of head you have. The Rainbird nozzles, when they're up, I love this hold-up tool because I pinch my fingers so much, but it's very possible there's a couple things. On your rotary nozzle, do you have a set screw that holds the nozzle in?
Yeah.
Some manufacturers do not have the engineering in them of other manufacturers, so the water doesn't fall out as it goes. They rely like the old Maxi-Paw, remember the diffuser screw that you used to screw into the pattern of water? You know, have you ever, on an oscillating sprinkler, you used to set that set screw and it broke up the water.
Okay.
That's called a diffuser screw. Some manufacturers on their rotor heads are designed to run, now is it just that one particular head doing it or all of them?
That particular one is, it's a different model number. I think
Okay.
it's all Rainbirds, but it's a different model.
Okay. Sometimes, and what I've seen most of the time is the nozzle blew out and you're shooting a solid stream. The nozzle's not even in there. Now, I've seen that more than once. Rotor heads can have debris in them. It can be in that jet back here in the back isn't jetting the water properly. Rotor heads have a tendency, and that's why it's so important to go head-to-head coverage to get rid of that 20-foot ring. But you should have fallout throughout. There was an installer in town, loved this head, very loyal to it, did everything with it. But he was trying to use it in spaces in a 20-foot space. This is not a 20-foot head. They have manufactured some nozzles, they're called MPR nozzles, match precipitation. They do 20-foot, 30-foot, and 35-foot. This head with the biggest nozzle is designed, it'll go up 50 feet. And I've seen them do it on temporary waters with some of the city stuff where they had a lot of water, where we had 1.5 and 2-inch laterals, so we were dumping water. But we had to set them up real quick. This head in a residential yard, this is a great head from, we can do the 25-foot now, but it's a great head for that 27-foot up to that 35, 38-foot. Most yards, we're not, you know, there's some homes out that we're watering an acre. God forbid, I don't want their water bill. But I mean, we do got to get out and we want to cover that 40-foot or 38-foot span. But most people in a residential system only have anywhere from 10 to 15 gallons a minute. We don't have the option of putting a number 4 nozzle out here and dumping 4 gallons a minute for 6 heads and running 24 gallons a minute out of a residential system. Does anybody have anything extraordinary at their place? I mean, we're all basically got 1 inch or 3/4 inch services, right? Some of us might have a pump and a well, but we're still operating off 1 inch services. So you're talking 12 to 15 gallons a minute max. So these heads, we're going to operate with that number 2 and number 3 if we're going to put any amount of heads on a zone. So when you do the wrong nozzle, what this guy was doing, to make it shoot shorter, he put the biggest nozzle they had, like a number 6. He acted like it flooded, so it was like it having a leak in the line, so they wouldn't shoot as far. But my gosh, he was dumping out 18, 20 gallons a minute. There wasn't there, so it acted like a leak, didn't have enough pressure. The seals weren't coming up and sealing, it was leaking around the head. He's not doing that anymore. We got him toned down to use the right head for the right distance. If you have a 20-foot area, it should either be a Rainbird 3500, 3504, or the 32 SA is the hardware store line of that. If the nozzle, it could have debris in the nozzle, the screw may be interfering or may need to interfere. The engineering in these nozzles that come with ours are a little bit different than what comes with those box stores, and they have a tendency to a little bit more of a jet. So that could be what's going on. Yes, ma'am.
So Bill, do you guys go out into the field, or we have to come to you to get the products, right? But do you have somebody that can come out and troubleshoot?
I've been known to do it, Diane.
Okay.
It's not what you know, it's who you know. I mean, I got a lot of buddies that have bought a lot of systems that I've toned up. I got a couple other co-workers that have gone over and helped their friends. To have a set person, no, because we're not in the business to compete with our contractors.
Gotcha.
You know, there's a lot of good installers. We do as much coaching as we can. I was going to wait till later, but if you go online or go into your app store, Rainbird has 2 great apps. One is it's in this booklet. It's about how to Wi-Fi your clock. The other one is their whole catalog now. They're not printing anything. Nobody's printing anything anymore. But they have a resource app. It gives you all your designs. It gives you your GPMs. It gives you your nozzle selections. It gives you recommendations. It gives you everything that's in this drip book that's in front of you. It gives you everything, and it's all online. It's all free. So when you talk about troubleshooting, if you're out there and working on a weekend and we're closed, that's the difference between us and a box store also, is our hours we work, but are available, I should say. That resource app, it helps engineers. Our local irrigation guy for the city uses it all the time. It helps builders, contractors, because it's at their fingertips. So you talk about setting up manifolds, you talk about what we were talking about earlier. A lot of that information's on that resource guide, okay? I alluded to it earlier. Is there any other questions on turf or questions or potentials? So we're going to jump into drip. I don't know how we doing for time.
You're good.
Okay. As far as drip irrigation, I alluded to it earlier. Gallons per hour versus gallons per minute. What do we got to know for something we're doing gallons per hour? The exact same thing we need to know that we're running gallons per minute. We need to know our sun and our shades. We need to know our soils. We need to know our slopes, elevations. Okay? We need to know everything we need to know about turf, we need to know about drip. The only thing we're going to control with drip, we need to know how our water's available, but we're going to control the pressure. We're going to know our pressure, but we're going to help control it at a different rate. With the rotors and the pop-ups, we can control it at the head. With drip irrigation, we're going to control it with other devices, with pressure regulators, and wise trainers, because drips are running gallons per hour. Where our nozzles on a turf head are regulated by the size and the port and the engineering for the distance and the GPM. All the drips are regulated by pressure compensating emitters. That pressure compensating is really critical. Again, we're talking about what? Precipitation, placing water where we want it, when we want it. The old rancher used to take his pocket knife or a sharp nail or an awl. He'd run the poly pipe out across the tree line, start poking holes. Little holes at first, bigger holes as we went down the line. Bigger hole's going to put out more water than little hole. Well, they all sprayed till they didn't have any water down at the end. When you can't control the flow, now did water get to his trees? Dang right it did. Some more than others, some not enough. But water got there, so did he irrigate? Absolutely. Could he done it more efficiency? Absolutely. With pressure compensating emitters, sprays, emitter, any of it, the same amount of water hits the first tree or plant as it does the last one. Long as you stay within the realms of what it's given you, how much flow. Now, there's a little slide rule that came in and I just seen this. I just received this in the mail. So this is kind of cool. If you look at that little slide rule that was in your deal, the first side has a tree showing. And you talk about your little seedlings and whatnot. It talks about the canopy of the tree. So you slide your slide rule till you see what your canopy is. So I went to a 10-foot canopy. So that means I had a wingspan of that. And you look at your environment, cool environment, warm environment, hot environment, and it tells you how many recommended. Now again, they don't know your soils, they don't know your wind. This is a generic recommendation, okay? Some of you live up on a knob that have a hell of a lot more wind than somebody down in a hole. So you have to have your own common sense. So let's just say we're in a warm environment right now, and we want to use a moderate 7.5 gallons a day is what that tree should take. So we turn the unit over, we pull our slide rule down somewhere between 7 and 8. We'll pick 8 because we don't want to be shy. And then that happens to tell you how many emitters at what GP gallons per hour on the other side. If you want to turn it over so you're looking at this side now, you slide it down to 8. If you're using ½ gallon an hour emitters and you're going to run it for an hour, you can put 16 of those emitters. It's going to take 16 of those to get that tree wet at ½ gallon an hour. Okay, or that's how many you can run. And you go down to 2 gallons an hour, you can put 4. And then you got emitters. Emitters there's all sorts of flow rates. This one just went up to 5. They have emitters that are going up to 10 gallons an hour. Okay? So depending what kind of trees you have and what kind of time frame you have, it's just kind of a neat little tool. Just showed up in the mail today. I thought it was kind of fun to play with because everybody asked me, how much water did I put on? I say, go ask your tree guy. We'll get you the water because I'm not going to be, Bill said put that much water on, and all of a sudden we killed it because it was too much or not enough. I plead the fifth and say, go ask your tree guy. But this is a good little guide, and we'll provide it. There's about 3 types, very simple emitters, a type of drips. Even though there's hundreds of ways the water gets out of the water, there's only about 3 styles. The first one is what I'm going to call plug and play or manually inserted emitters. They're usually a separate device, okay? You usually have some of you guys might have had a hole punch back in the day where it punched a hole and then you pushed it in. There's a lot of different ways to do it. Rainbird has this handy dandy little tool. The discharge part of this port's wide enough, it locks onto this. All you got to do is walk up to your hose and hopefully not plug it in, and there you go. 1 2 gallon an hour emitter just been plugged in. Anytime when you use a plug and play emitters, you're typically using them On shrubbery, plants, anything, and even in a garden, where you only want to put the water on that plant. Mandy has some raised beds out here. She has some that look like they're plumb full of everything. It looked like, right? It had some carrots and
Yep.
everything in it. You have one planter that looks like it just has, what, a few set of tomatoes.
Mm-hmm.
And then was the other one had some mounds?
The other one, yes, I dumped some pots in there yesterday. so-
Okay, so if I didn't want to excite any weed growth or other plant growth in between this area, I got my nice mulch down, I got my rock. I don't want to use a spray, I don't want to use something that's going to excite growth between these spaces. So I'm going to use a plug and play emitter. We're going to find out from our plant guy how much water we want to put on them, and you need to know your time range. So again, we're using gallons per hour, so usually we'll run this zone longer. And if the guy says it needs 3 gallons a day or 1 gallon a day, you're going to put, and you're going to run your time zones accordingly with the number of emitters. So if let's just say it asks for 2 gallons a day. Do I want to run 1 2-gallon emitter for an hour? Typically, no. What I've been taught and what I've been seeing from most people, because of potential plugging or failure, run multiple emitters. So I'd run at least 2 1-gallons and maybe some half-gallons. However I wanted to do it, whatever I had my watering window open to water at, because if there was a failure, at least one of the emitters is going to get you some water on that tree. Okay? If I just ran one emitter and it happened to fail, got debris in it, got plugged, that one shrub got 0 water. We don't want that. And when I see designs coming from the professionals, very seldom do you ever see a single emitter even on the smallest plant. They call them 1-galloners when they come out in pots, and they'll put like 2 half-gallons, but they'll control their time zones to where they're not overwatering. So if you had little bitty trees, and I still had some bigger trees that I threw in that, I have itty bitty emitters, and I put some bigger emitters, so if I'm going to run my time, everybody's going to get, I know my flows, I know my GPMs, I can balance that zone so everything's getting the water it should get. Okay? So, yes, sir?
So are we talking, if you're talking about, say, let's say 10 emitters, I got 100 trees, that's 10 zones.
That's what?
That's 10 zones, right?
No. I would,
You said 10 emitters.
well, I mean, a zone is a single valve that runs a lateral, okay? So, you know your flows. So, half-inch pipe can carry about 5 to 6 gallons a minute. That's 360 gallons an hour. That's max. That's not going to happen out of emitters, because once you start dripping, you're going to decrease that. So you can run probably, if you have those seedlings, I know right now, the deal we set up with my buddy, we got half-gallon emitters, 2 of them on every tree, and there's just those little seedlings, and I think we're watering, there's over 100 on that one zone.
Really? You can run that many?
Well, because they're pressure compensating, okay? And so we're running 1 gallon an hour, so that's 100 gallons an hour, but in 1 hour, at 60 gallons, you know, you're at 6 gallons, you're running you have the flow of 360 gallons an hour, but you're only burning up 100 of it, because they're pressure compensating. So you can put a lot of drip on a zone. Now, when we talk about knowing, what do we talk about? Soils, slopes, suns. There was an installer that first started putting a tree farm over here by the Hillcrest School. Their water source was downhill. And they ran simple couple 100 feet of half-inch line. Well, the head difference to get up the hill, plus emitting along the way, couldn't get water to the top of the hill. It was too steep of a hill. We had to bring the source up to the top. Then he could run all the water he wanted. He had to overcome the slope. Because there's elevation difference, there's pressure drops, you got a lot of flow loss. A lot of installers, and we stock a lot of it also, is 3/4 inch drip line. Everybody thinks drip lines have to be off 1/2 inch. That's not a true statement. If any of you guys are out in the country and you got a big tree belt, or if you have a long run before you get to your drip, I highly encourage you to go to 3/4 inch. The amount that it's funny when they talk about size matters. A 1/4 inch in pipe size will dang near double your flows. You can run 22 gallons a minute through 1.25 inch pipe, and you max out at about 12 gallons a minute through 1 inch pipe on velocity curves. Same thing from 1/2 to 3/4. You're at 5 to 6, you're pushing almost 10 gallons a minute on a velocity through 3/4. So if you want to get your water out to a large tree belt, don't hesitate to use a 3/4 inch line. You still plug and play them. It works just fine. The other style of emitters, other than plug and play, are these manufactured ones. I don't know if everybody can see it, but these have holes in it, right? These are preset at a flow and a space. This happens to be basically 1 gallon per hour on 12-inch spacings. This was a little ring that I built around my little tree last year. I put it out in the berm. Something we learned working with the city, by golly, that Steve Argenal came up with this, brought it to us, about building rings to excite root growth all the way around a tree. I can run this off a 3/4 drip. I can run it off a PVC lateral. I can run it off this 1/2 inch drip. In my case, I just took the garden hose and I had one tree. But as you noticed, I plug and played on this. What I was attempting to show here in my poor art, if in my posy patch, where I have random plants everywhere, and I want to water everything everywhere, it's very common to run a soaker hose, right? Yeah. Well, soaker hoses seem to have some variable life, I'm hearing. So ideally, when you run, at your source, if you could run a header across both ends and run your drip in between, and you don't have to hit every plant. You run your lines and you place them and you can wiggle it. This is snaky. You don't have to run them straight. Run where you need to run them and hold them in place. If you can get your source to both ends or loop them, where this is solid and you loop, it helps your distribution. I tried drawing a hanging plant in there. That's where your plug and play comes in. For those of you that have a flower bed and then you have some hanging plants that might be hanging off whatever, if you have a way, for instance, my wife has one of those barrels with a 4x4 in it and she has hanging plants over it, I can run I can hide my little 1/4 inch drip line right here, and I can run it right off that emitter. I can bring it up. I can put my little tubing stake right in her pot, and I can drip that pot while I'm dripping everything else. They show a lot of it in the book, and they show people running along their roof and then coming down when they're hanging it from their soffits. I've had really challenged with that, people doing that here. It's heck to get clipped to the gutters or the roof, and the sun really beats that up sitting on a hot roof. If you can come up from the ground, highly recommended. Okay? When you're talking about drip, we talk about heavy water when we're talking about turf. When you talk about drip, all their sprays, and there's a number of different sprays, and they're good sprays, And sometimes they're necessary. You guys are the gardeners. Some of you guys say that a lot of the plants take their moisture in through the needles. You know, they'll say evergreens, you need to get your needles wet, or my shrubs will say, you know, spray it, or some of the plants like to be cooled. You can plug and play a Zeri spray, and they come on spikes. We can use these fittings that plug into this hose, and they just thread on. And this is a little spray, and they have them in the spike mode. They have, you can have a little valve on the side. It's a little happy thing. It can go from 0 to about 10 gallons an hour, and it has about that kind of a radius. And people will put them up in their plants, and they'll spray down and make coolings and whatnot. The only challenge we have that I've seen with these have been real effective in wind protected areas. and people say, where's that in Gillette? Again, that's timing. I've had some people actually run the drip right up inside an evergreen and just let these water, especially where the new growth is. I've seen these used very effectively in some of the posy patches and in the hanging plants where they got them mounted off the post and sprayed to the plants. But again, there's no way to take a spray and make it a heavy water. So they're a little susceptible. Yes, ma'am?
That in your hand, is that a hose or is that a pipe? I don't.
This is actually a drip. This is actually emitter tubing. This is actually a pipe. It actually has the emitters built right into it.
What's it made out of?
This is polyethylene. And you notice it kind of has a memory. I've had this curled up in my garage. When you put these out, warm weather does hold it down. But I can't say enough about staking it. I don't care who stakes or what stakes, but stake it down. And especially at the end where your emitters are at your plants. There's nothing more frustrating where you put your emitters in, you run your spaghetti tube, as most people call it, the drip tube, right over to the plant, and you come back and the wind came along or the bunny came along and they're somewhere out of the cage. Stake them down. If you want to see your emitter, if you want to bury you can get this with holes in it. You can get it without holes in it. So when you're using plug and play, typically this would be solid. Same pipe, no emitters. You put the emitters where you want.
I have drip irrigation in my vegetable garden and my flower garden, but I've never seen that. We just have to replace those drip hoses a lot. So what's the best drip hose to use?
Well, you're talking
Just a hose that,
the regular soaker hose?
yes.
I'd be lying to tell you if I told you, because I don't sell that. I have not had experience. I've talked to several people that, I mean, this is a catch-22. If you go into a flower bed, you want to water it easily, but you know in the fall you're going to be digging everything, tearing up, or in the spring you're going to till it up. So what are you going to do with it? You want something that can remove fairly easy. I'm going to be lying to you if I'm going to tell you that you take out a grid of this that's 4 or 5 feet wide and it's 2 or 3 runs, that you don't have a kind of a mess when you take it out. I will tell you it's more durable than the soaker hoses that leak out and or coil up. I can tell you you're going to get more life out of it. I can tell you it's much easier to repair. Okay? They have...
Bill, do you carry that at contract?
Yes. Yeah, and this is readily available anywhere. But yes, we do. And we carry it in blank and we carry it with the holes in it. So like in the flower bed, your posy patch, this is a very, very effective hose if you just want to water everything. Okay? And then if you have a hanging plant or if you have something that needs some additional water than what this is putting out, you can plug and play and add. You have the water available. I mean, there's no way that you're using up all the water that can flow through this. Very seldom. You will on a big tree belt, but very seldom in a posy patch. The fittings, there's all sorts of neat fittings. These are, a lot of people call the shark bite. People are familiar with that with their plumbing. This is what they call an easy fit fitting. There's several manufacturers of it. This fitting, some of you might have the black, the little drip codes with the black with the green line. Some of you might have this brown. That's basically an 18 millimeter to a 16 millimeter size. We call it 1/2 inch because that's what we think it is. The drip world, it goes from 18 millimeter to 16 millimeter. This fitting will connect anybody's stuff together. If it's in the millimeter, it's not actually 1/2 inch poly, but if it's a drip tube, this fitting will connect any of it together. So if you end up at Menards one day, at Home Depot one day, in our store another day, and you might get different size tubing, these fittings will connect them. What made this fitting so popular is at the end of the line, when the little notches are lined up, can't get this plug out. I give it a little twist, and the plug comes right out. It's imperative that when you turn a drip zone system on, especially with our hard heavy water, you were talking about chemicals, you were talking about minerals in your well water. We all have hard water because nobody should be watering with softened water, right? Our city water is around 30, 35 grams hard. Some of you are fortunate enough to live out in Antelope Valley or with Sleepy Hollow, and those people have great water. Other people, we're just stuck with hard water. So I highly recommend, even with soft water though, I recommend at least once a month through the season, minimum. Do it as you feel necessary. Find the end of your drip line, pop the cap, flush the line. Even though we got clean treated water, it gets debris in it. It gets hard water deposits. It gets junk in it. That's why people run filters. You ever seen a filter that never doesn't catch something? Flush your lines. It'll pick up anything. It'll help pull the stuff out of the backside of an emitter, and it'll help it work much more functional. This is what you have to have, some type of a removable end with these gray fittings or brown fittings. They work only on 17 millimeter pipe. Netafin makes a 17 millimeter, Rainbird makes a 17 millimeter, I think Hunter makes a 17 millimeter. These fittings work very well, they're very inexpensive. The nice thing about them, if you change something, you can cut it off, you can take your sharp knife, you can reuse this fitting. The shark bite or stab fitting or the easy fit fitting, it's done. Once you stick a hose in it, you're not taking it apart. If you do, you broke it. It won't ever seal up again when you use it. So if you're having to move things and change things, especially if you're pulling in and out of a posy patch every year, chances are you're going to damage your hose. I'd highly recommend you use 17 millimeter feeders. It's very easy to repair, and if you kink something or break something at that elbow, you can cut it off and just redo it. These are a little tougher. Again, but these have their best spot is you don't know what you have, it'll stab it. If you're not sure, these will stab it. I guess I kind of lost where I was at. The idea of the drip, we talked about the sprays, we talked about the plug and play, we talked about built-in emitters. The advantage of the plug and play, you put the water at the target without exciting anything else in between. The advantage of this, you have multiple flows, usually 1/2 gallon an hour or 1 gallon an hour, and multiple spacings, usually 12 inch or 18 inch. So if you want to do rows and beds, much more efficient than putting an emitter at every carrot. You're going to soak it. If you got tomatoes and you have mounds and you don't want to excite weed growth or any other growth in between, use a plug and play. So it becomes your plant, your turf. Other place you can use this very effectively, have you ever noticed right at Arby's, between Lakeway and Arby's, there's a very narrow, it's a really mounded up, it's kind of a high edge there, and they got a few trees in there, but they have turf in there. When they first did it, they tried doing it with 4-foot sprays. Well, between the wind and the directions, and that thing was only about 3 foot wide, and they couldn't keep water. It's very mounded up. They went back in with this product. The difference between this product and some, this actually has little copper built in, and you know how trees don't and roots don't like copper? This has little copper wires in it, so they could, for real narrow areas, if you got a little boulevard or you got that little spot where you might have, you know, that one narrow little turf, no matter what you do, you're going to water either the street. There's a lot of the parts of homes where they have the sidewalk, a real narrow spot, and then they got the street, or you have your neighbors, and you got this silly 2-foot strip between you and your neighbor next to your driveway, and no matter what you do, you're going to help him water, or you got a fence, and now you're going to just hit the fence. You can sub-irrigate with this. I don't recommend doing it on a wide area. People that have, they look like their yard looks like a checkerboard. You can see right where the grid is. But on these narrow areas where you can concentrate it, it's been effective. It's mainly along the guy that has that driveway, and he has the fire, you know, it just comes that narrow little strip. It's a pretty effective way to do it. It's pretty maintenance free. One of the things I didn't bring in, and I wished I would have, but they all went out on a job. Another very, very effective way to water trees, and I think it's near the back of this book, it's called root waters. Yeah, it's right at the very end, very last page. Root waters are, thank you, ma'am. Did we answer your questions at all?
Absolutely. Thank
Good, you bet. Root waters use bubblers, okay? So now you're back to gallons per minute. But you're down to like 1/4 gallon per minute or 1/2 gallon per minute. And do you remember the days where they used to talk about you want to excite deep root growth? So they used to talk about driving a pipe down there and running water in, so drilling holes in the pipe. Well, this basically is a basket. You can get a sock for it. So it does. The bubbler fills up that whole basket and it filters it out. So it's helping excite deep root growth. It's good for mature trees. Right now there's a bunch of them going on that project on clover. If you've been on North Clover, there's been a band of evergreens out there on the very north end of Clover. And they had a watering system in there. It was tried to do it with drip. Trees got big. It was high maintenance. They're putting an all new system using all new root waters. All the new trees along 4J are going to get root waters. They have found the maintenance of a bubbler and these baskets have been virtually zero. The water is going to get into that basket, and it's going to get out of the basket, and it's going to get to the roots. It's wind doesn't affect it. Kids with weed eaters don't affect it. And that's the problem with some of the drips, because once you get in the mulch and your mulch maybe gets weak, or you got to go weed, or the kids weed whacking, or they're pulling, and you got they call it spaghetti tube, your drip tube running through there, very vulnerable. Bunnies love it. Does anybody know why bunnies love to eat on polyethylene? You'll get a free screwdriver if you can answer it. What's that?
It's got chocolate in it.
Almost to them, it has salt. Polyethylene's heavy in salt. And so they love to eat on salt. If you have a bunch of bunnies, I had a rancher tell me this, and his wife was trying to get his tree going, and they were eating on everything all winter long. After all that drip line was still out there, they ate through it. He finally put a damn salt block out for them. He says, I gotta salt the damn rabbits, he said. Yeah, it did slow them way down because it's heavy in salt. We've had them sitting in our yard, our pipe yard, and we have that corrugated flexible tubing, and there'll be a whole, like somebody walked up with a big bite, but he nibbled at a time, just took out a big circle out of the end of a pipe. Just ate it right up. The drip is a wonderful thing because it's not much affected by wind. So it keeps your roots down, it keeps your water down low. Very effective way to do it. I suggest that you pick and play what's going to work best for you. Decide where you want to excite growth, where you don't want to excite growth. Know your flows, know your plants. If everybody says I can do everything with a 1 gallon hour emitter, that's probably true if they have the exact same plant going through the exact same thing. But if you're trying to mix and match your drip to mature trees, small trees, in between trees, different trees drink water. I'm not a tree guy, but I've been told that a lot of the evergreen shrubberies drink up water more than other smaller trees will drink up water. If you got real tight clay out there in the country, and you dump 2 gallon hour emitters, you want to shorten your window, but all you see is a puddle of water, and it can evaporate as much as it can soak in, put in the smaller emitters. Know your soils. Yeah.
When you were talking about putting a 3/4 inch poly line, whatever, and you're going down to a 1/4 inch riser, how does that affect the flow rate?
Through the 3/4, it doesn't at all. Remember, everything that's going to be out of the end of this tube, even if I use a straight connector, okay, that'll shoot a hell of a stream. It'll be just like you punched it with an awl. But the minute I plug this pressure compensating emitter in the end of it, I come through my little tubing stake, and I put my emitter on. Now I've just put back pressure on it. It's a pressure compensating. This only is going to allow 2 gallons an hour through it.
So now you're adjusting the time to make it water.
That's exactly right. So now,
So pressure isn't the fact, it's the time.
no, because what we did with this, we knocked the pressure down. Remember, plug and play, I might have missed this, plug and play, they need 40 pounds or less pressure. Factory installed emitters that are built into the pipe can handle up to 60 pounds. So if you're going to run emitters, you will need to put in a device, or you got to know your pressure. Some guys are operating on a full well. Their pressure switch is set at 40-60. When that system's running, it's only putting out 40 pounds of pressure if all the things leaking. For those of you that are on pumps, how many of you guys are operating off pumps in your irrigation system? It's imperative that you know what your pump's capabilities are and you size your zones accordingly so you don't cycle and short cycle your pump. You do not want to shorten the life of your pump. Can be a challenge with drip because you're not using enough water, but it's leaking. I mean, what's the most frustrating thing with a pump? You got a leak out there somewhere and you hear that pressure tank go 20 minutes later, because it pressured up right away. So if you're running drip and you got a pump system, it might be important to either run enough drip or you run something along with it, so you run one of your turf zones with your drip. Yes, ma'am.
Maybe a silly question, but how do you know what your pressure is? How do you find out? Is there a way to test it?
Absolutely. There's some friendly guys down at Contractors that usually loan you a gauge.
Okay.
And you can put it right to your hose bib. And and there's 2 pressures you want to know. When we do a irrigation system, when I talk about pressures, knowing your pressures, I want to know your operating pressure. I want to know when you open up your hose bib,
All the way?
all the way, and you have a gauge sitting on it, take a garden hose Y. Put your kid on the other side of the house with the hose and you watch this one. Pressure always equalizes to a 1/2 inch pipe or 2 inch pipe. Your house is going to have extra pressure, so let it run for a while. Don't just do it in the first 30 seconds. Let it run for a while. Let it get, especially those of you guys who are on pumps, let it run to where you know that you don't have the pressure tank built up and it's giving you 60 pounds. Wait till you know what the pump is putting out. Know what your city's putting out, or your water purveyor if you're one of the subdivisions. Run your hose, watch your gauge. Know where you're operating. Then the real trick is measure the water as it's running. So dump your hose, simple test, put it in a bucket. How long did it take fill a 5-gallon bucket? Okay, so at 30 seconds, filled a 5-gallon bucket. So that means you're running 10 gallons a minute. Now, caution this, on a hose bib that's fed with a little now PEX pipe in all your houses, your flows are terrible. If you're really marginal, because when guys come into me now and they bring in a design and to tell me to design it, they're telling me they got 5-6 gallons a minute. That's out of their hose bib. And that's right, that's all you're getting. That's why the rain trains and the daisy chains aren't working worth a dang. House built back in the 70s with 3/4 inch copper, I could get almost 8 to 9 gallons a minute out of a hose bib. The new houses with PEX, you're getting 5 to 6. Same pressure, you're still getting your 60 or 70 or 80 pounds of pressure, but you're not getting any flow. So it's important to get your stub out, a separate dedicated line for your sprinkler system, then measure your flow. Okay, so if you're operating off a horse head hydrant, yard hydrant, whatever you want to call them, they'll pull it, I got 25 gallons a minute. Yeah, you do. But check the pressure when it's running, you're probably operating on the very lowest end of your pressure system. I've seen it go down as low as 30 pounds. So now I got to say, I don't need 25 gallons a minute for your sprinkler system. We need to know, what are you operating at? What pressure do we need? Free screwdriver. What pressure we need for rotor heads? What's the optimum pressure? 45. Yep. You might need this if you have a rainbird head. 45 for a rotor head is optimum pressure. So I want you, if you're going to run rotors, slow your water down till your pressure builds. Now let's measure your flow. That's the flow we want to know. When you can maintain 45 to 50 pounds of pressure, what's your flow? Then we can size your system. I don't worry about the sprays because we got these little heads that all say PRS on them. It doesn't sound piece of nothing. It's pressure reducing system. I could knock this down to 30 very easy, very inexpensively. I can get the heavy droplet out of a spray. I don't worry about the drip irrigation. I have these pressure reducing Y strainers. This does help, and this is part of your flushing. Check your stream. Don't just turn your system on and then wait till blowout, then check it again next spring. Check this, see what you're getting in your water. And if you find that you got a clean system, then you don't have to worry about it. But you won't know until you check it. Take time to check this. This will knock it down to 30 pounds. So now I know I got my plug and play taken care of. You can operate your emitter hose at 30 pounds too. If you happen to have an area where you don't want to mess with it, it'll take up to 60. So if you know your operating pressure and you just want to hook it up to a hose or you have an inexpensive timer and so you can just water your posies, use it and set it and forget it. Just don't forget to flush it every occasionally. Maintenance. How often, who has livestock? How often do you check the livestock water when you got cows and horses? Especially in the wintertime, how often do you check it out there?
Multiple times a day.
About daily, right? Is it frozen over? Do I have, my floats broke? Do you have to check an irrigation system that often? No. But do you have to check it? Yes. The people that come into us, my water bill was $300. Fix my system. They never walk their system. It comes on at 2 o'clock in the morning, they're sound asleep, and they don't have a clue that they're watering, 2 of the heads are watering the street, the other one's watering the alley, and so forth. Take that test, most people have a clock, take that test mode. Grip your favorite beverage, come home at night after work when the wind's not blowing, hit that test, and walk your system. Thank you, sir. Walk your system. Look for brown spots. Look for mushrooms. What happens? Heads doesn't keep turning, so it waters one spot the whole night long, every night. All of a sudden you got this one really green spot full of mushrooms. Find out why. Check your valve boxes. Don't let them get built up with dirt. Covered ants and stuff will do it. And it'll get into the seals, it'll get into your solenoids. Keep them cleaned out, keep them sprayed. For your own safety, spray before you get into a valve box. If they have a hole, spray it. If not, pull it up, spray it. It's the best spot for brown recluse and black widows in our country is a valve box. The last thing I'm going to mention about maintenance, check your controller. Bad power can bump and mess up a controller. Why? It's technology, I guess. But I've seen programs all of a sudden, somebody's never programmed anything in B and C start times. All of a sudden there's a time. And how come this thing's running at 2 o'clock in the afternoon? My neighbor called me and I'm not home, and why is my clock running at 2 o'clock in the afternoon? Well, it could come from dirty power, it could come from it just happened. Check your times, check your start times. Make sure there's not a ghost program that ended up there. That can cost you a lot of money when you're at work and your system's running and you don't know it. Until you get home and say, God, you know your system ran this afternoon? Check your controller. Is there any other things that I could quick try? And I know we pushed our time, or is there anything else that you guys want to know about it? A situation that maybe some other people have that we can answer?
How do you prevent running over them?
Send your teenagers off to college and move them out. I tell you what, dang it, it didn't get in this box. The ideal position on a head, one is if you can place it in instead of right on a corner, that does help. Let that head, make sure you got good head-to-head placement, let that head water in behind it, okay? Reason we set our heads on funny pipe, there's a reason for it. It's not because it's funny, it's not because I can just lift it a little bit. Once it's buried, it's pretty stiff. But what it allows you to do, if you have to dig down to this head, because it got ran over too low, you're not digging around your lateral pipe, the expensive part to fix. This pipe is double tough. You notice there's no clamps on it. It uses a spiral barb fitting, and this is how you can, your depths of your line can be away, and you can adjust this. So especially if you got a slope, if you try and set this head perfectly level on a slope, it's going to hit the slope here and shoot forever out there. You can roll this head with the grade of your slope. So those of you that are watering a hillside, you're watering a plane. But these do help, and it keeps you from damaging. So if your head is right on the lateral line, and it takes a direct hit from a riding lawnmower, kids using it those were great. Third base, second base, and first base, that big old head, and every kid stepped right on it. And if you had your head right on it, you cracked the PVC or the poly fitting below, now you're digging it up. This will take that brunt. So if you are going to have to be close or in harm's way of running over, make sure it's on a swing pipe. Okay, that's imperative. When I have heads out in the middle of the yard, I still have these on swing pipe. You never put your lateral lines right underneath the head. The challenge is you're going to grow, you're going to settle, you can easily, if I dig up, I can roll this head around. I mean, 2 inches, inch and a half, one way or the other, it's not going to make a difference in your coverage. So if I got to raise this up, the simple way to do it, and I wished I would have brought them, they have these neat new little fittings called risers. They're not the cutoff nipples. We've all seen the cutoff nipple, right? Short end one, and you can chop it off to make different lengths. They have a male-female fitting, so they just screw right together. They raise everything about 1 inch at a time. Number one maintenance problem in every yard is the heads are now down here. When you put them in, they were right here. The dirt should be basically at the lip of any of your heads. When I bury this head, I got my dirt here. This is actually above. We're going to grow our grass 3 inches, right? So even on a new lawn, we're not mowing right away. So once we're going to mowing, we want our dirt, we want this much of this head exposed. Your lawnmower is never going to hit that. If you're cutting your lawn that close, you got a problem. We laugh about it, but people are always too scared to get these heads up. Now, what a challenge is, if you get them up that skosh that we like to as adults, so we can mow over them, we can see them, we can work on them. If you got an active yard with children, it can be a trip, so you got to kind of be careful. But when I'm first putting it in, the dirt comes to about here, I have this much exposed. In no time at all, the sod builds up. These things are popping up, and I'm so proud of these screwdrivers. They work on Hunter heads, and they work on Rainbird heads, and they work on a couple other brands of heads. Hunter, you got to use an Allen wrench to adjust, but this little screwdriver does all the adjusting, all the nozzle fixing, but it's also, you pull them up. So when this head pops up, it's popping up 4 inches. The whole idea is, when this is at the base of the turf, and you pop up here, you have a full clearance for that base of that, and the base of the nozzle's at 4, not the head, so that base of that nozzle is clearing the grass.
So what if it doesn't pop up 4 inches? Is there something stuck down below?
That could be that, or you don't see 4 inches of it because it's too dang low. Most of the time people don't see that because they don't realize it, but their heads need to be raised. And those male, female, it works out great because when you take this head off, if it's on a nipple system, either the nipple's going to stay in the pipe below or it's going to come with here. So I just screw it on either one spot and I can take it. If you're real careful, most of the time that casing, it'll just make a nice smooth casing. Pull it right out, add your riser, screw it right back in. And you reset your head, and now you're back up to the height so you see it. If your heads are barely, if you're one of the 3 inch, about what you're keeping your lawn, Diane?
Well, who knows?
Yeah, well, that seems to be ever since.
But I noticed, I just kicked it on yesterday, first time I turned it on, and one particular head, it was like that high. But when I think about it, that is kind of a low spot.
Well, okay, so check first of all to make sure, walk over and look at it, don't look at it from a distance. When you don't have a head keeping up, a lot of times the wiper seal's failed. Or there's a leak between the last head and here. It's lost its water pressure. Debris will keep this from coming up. It's amazing how much debris ends up. You know, when we use our nozzles for our pop-up sprays, they all come with these screens. Did anybody ever check these screens before? Have you ever pulled your screens?
No.
You ought to. If you haven't yet, you want to increase your efficiency. Anybody that has these little pop-up sprays that are just shooting fans, take the time, pull them and check these screens. I'll guarantee you there's crap in them. And you're changing the water dynamics of getting to that nozzle to do its job. I'll guarantee you there's crap in there.
Do you have to replace those, or can you just blow them out there?
You can clean them up. Clean them up. It's very easy. So, same with these. If you get one that's not popping up, chances are it's either it's got debris, it's hung up, so it starts acting like there's a leak because it doesn't sit in the wiper seal. Right. So it can't stand up. Or you got a problem between here and there. Thanks, folks. Hope that was helpful. Good. Does everybody know? I mean, I can show you how to do Rainbird or Hunter, but do you know what happens when you have to change your head and how to reset it? Does everybody know how to reset their heads? The left-hand stop, right-hand stops, and how to bring them back around? Everybody good on those? Anybody want to know how?
Yes.
Okay. So when you tighten up a head, every head, I don't care what manufacturer, will have a spot where the nozzle's at, usually indicated by an arrow. Okay? Every head, you can hear me clicking it. There's a left-hand stop and a right-hand stop. And you got to go all the way one way or the other to make it work. So if you have Hunter, you're a right-hand stop. If we're going to talk about Rainbird, we're a left-hand stop. So when you sit behind this head, and I got to put one in, I always find my left-hand stop. Okay? I know where it's at. I know my turret's tight. I start tightening it up. If the reason I find my left-hand stop, if I'm going to water this corner right here, if I'm getting close to where I want to be, I stop. I'm done. My left-hand stop is set. Now this comes out of the box at 180, right? So now I'm spraying out here in the street. Because you can preset any good manufacturer's rotor almost dry to the type. So now you take your handy dandy screwdriver and they'll have an indication plus or minus. So you just find your in there till you find this, you'll fill the screw. You're doing this without the water on, first of all. If you ever adjust your left-hand stops with the water running, you'll rip the gears out of anybody's head. You just rip them out, so you ruin the head. So I'm doing this dry. I've got my stop, but let's just say I tighten it up, and here I am. I'm way over here, and I need to be over here. What do? Old days, you had to take it apart, set it back in. All you do now is you just firmly grab the turret, aim it to where you want to go. But now, look it's way over here now. That's fine. I set my left-hand stop, I find my screwdriver, and I start turning it back to minus. I wished I could say that a one turn equaled X amount of degrees. They've never figured that out yet. So I went too far, so now I'll come back in here, go back to my left-hand stop. I went a little too far, I'll come back. And now I'm sitting right on a 90, right? See that arrow? I can do that almost perfectly dry every time. I will tell you, when you tighten up these heads, don't tighten them up oil filled tight. Give yourself some advantage. Where's it going to leak? All the water wants to come out the nozzle. I mean, you got to get it snug, but you don't have to crank them down. So when you tighten them, if you're kind of close, you can adjust the whole head to your left-hand stop. That's the quickest way. But if you got to put it back, then you just dry fit, you make your test run, and see where you're at. Once you turn your water on, if your left-hand stop, if for some reason is wrong, you shut your water off again, get it right. Turn your water back on, and you can micro-adjust your right-hand stop with the water running. That's okay. That won't hurt the gears. You can tweak it a little bit. But if you try and tweak the left hand with the water running, you'll tear them up.
You'll be buying a new head.
You know. So, but you don't have to sit there. There used to be, what everybody used to do, they get it in there and it wasn't right, so they took it apart and they changed it a cog, and then they changed the cog again. You don't have to do that. If you want to take it apart that simple, check, do you see the screen? They all have screens. Everybody, good heads, have screens in them. You check, make sure there's not buildup and debris in here. If they are, hose them off, clean them out, throw them in vinegar if you got real bad water. That canister's clean. There's nothing in the canister. You can do it all up here. Put it back in the ground. I got it tight. Check my left-hand stop. If I got to reset it, I just reset it and go. If I have to run it back past, and it almost sounds like it broke it, and now you've turned it into a full head, that's happened. Sounds like I just ruined it, right? Not really. I sit there and just find out where my left-hand stop is. Well, there it is. That happened to stay right where it needed to be. But you can sit there, and if you take it too far and you think you broke it, you just keep it going until you bring it back around, till you stop. Well, now it's a completely full head. That's okay. I just come back in here and I adjust it back where I want. These heads, almost anybody's manufacturers, have become very user-friendly.
Foolproof.
Well, yeah. But that is the simple. The other heads are just a little bit simple. The 5004 is by far the easiest head. A couple little accessories if you can get them. Make sure you have your tool to adjust your heads. This is a neat tool. Hold up tool. When you pull it up, it has a level in it. Also, it holds it up so you can change nozzles and work on it. Thanks, kiddo. Nice seeing you again. So this is a nice tool. You pull it up, set it in here. Now you got both hands free. This is doing all the work. You can make sure you got it all nice and plumbed up. And down on the ground it goes. So that's That saves a lot of blood blisters right here. Anything else?
Explain the ones that have the spring.
Oh. Well, do some of you guys still have the old impacts?
We do.
Okay.
And then replacements when they get broke. When she runs over with the mower, then replace it.
I wished I had my tool with me. Most people don't have these more, so I didn't bring the tools. So if anybody has the daisy chains or you have the maxi paws, I will tell you, you probably have this blue nozzle and you're putting out 3 gallons a minute. Probably don't need to be. This is that diffuser screw on the side that I was talking about. That's what breaks up the water. That's why this head could cheat so well, because you could break up the water to make it. It's a great head. Still sell a lot of them. There's a lot of people who won't give them up. It's a great head. Especially in an established yard, they don't get so much debris. Ideally, you would dig around them, put a whole gravel bath around them. You should have gravel all the way around these. And that, because these are a self-draining head, so that water is supposed to leave the canister. You got to check for your springs to be attached, because they'll come unhooked. That's when they quit going around and around. But these just slide, just like see if I can do this and show you. These just slide by pulling these stops. You push and pull these stops around. And then you just flip the tail down to make it a full or part circle. It just catches. It's the same as the little heads that you've been back and forth. They adjust all the same way. The distance and everything.
He showed me that still.
Well, we appreciate it. Is there anybody else that has any other questions? I'm sorry I took so much time, but
Thank you.
if you got any, come out to the store. We have a 10-year crew. Anybody can answer questions. It's just not me.
Contractor supply, right?
Yep. Use that resource app from Rainbird.
Got it.
That's a great thing. If you have a Rainbird controller, it's Wi-Fi ready. I'll guarantee you, you'll love it, especially come blowout time. Oh, that one's done. Click. That one's done now. Click. You don't have to go back and forth or be on your phone having somebody pushing buttons.
Thank you, Bill, so much for.
Thanks.
Do you have more questions? Definitely go down and see him at Contractor Supply. I roughly think I have 2 trees per person available. So if you would like to take 2 trees when you leave.